So, on to the point of today's video, and from the title, you probably guessed it, but I bought myself a tube bender and tube roller. Now, I don't have any projects offhand I immediately need to use this thing for, but it opens up the possibility to do a lot of cool things in the future, and when you see a good deal, you don't pass up on it. So here's what I ended up getting, a JD Square Model 3 tube bender with an 8-ton air over ram. It came with 6 dies, 1 3/4, 1.5 inch, 1 7/16, 1 1/8, inch round and inch square. And this really nice homemade tube roller with inch square dies. It also came with 2 tube notchers that are really nice. I like those. Now, nothing special about the frame. It's made out of 2 3/4 tube with 1/8 wall. It's really nice. I'm going to have a few modifications to make there. Now, what I really appreciate is that the previous owner set this thing up really nice. I could use it as is, no problem. But I've got a few ideas that I think will make it a little bit nicer to use and make it mine, so let's get to it. So another really important thing for me to figure out is how do you drive this thing? So typically on a tube roller, on the center die, you'll see a large handle or a pipe threading device. This one's a little different. It's chain driven off of either of the shafts. Now, the disappointing thing is these shafts are fixed. I cannot change their positions. We'll see if that's a limiting factor for me in the future, but for now, we're going to leave it as is. And I really like aesthetically cool things, so I think I need to fabricate a large wheel handle for this thing to run off of. So the bulk of what I would like to do is going to be to the tube roller. I need to add return springs to the center die, and I'm also not a huge fan of the screw twist to put pressure on it. I would like to use a 4-ton bottle jack, but as it sits right now, especially with that die up, that bottle jack's not going to fit. I'm also a little bit worried that the way he built this thing with these square dies on there, that I'm going to have a really rough time getting aftermarket dies to fit on it. So probably not going to happen this video, maybe a later one. I'll put some thought into that. So let's start with the easy stuff, getting my dies off the floor and out of my way. At least now, all of my dies have a home to live in, and those are off the floor, so I've got space to work again, and I think it's time to put the tubing bender back on. Before mounting the tube bender back to the frame, I wanted to cut off the lower cross member of the frame so it's easier to slide up against the wall and hide things in between the legs. Now, by doing so, I eliminate all of the rigidity of the ram mounted to the frame, which means I need to convert the frame mount to an air ram mount, and I'm going to use this swag off-road. Well, I get to give something new a try here today. So I've had this Unis Mister system set up on myself for a while now, and I absolutely love that thing compared to flood cooling, especially for a tool that you sometimes use a lot, sometimes not for months. Flood cooling is just a mess, but what's new is before I had a splitter nozzle hooked up right here, and I swapped it out for this little bat nozzle, so there's a sprayer on each side here. They just hit right on the bottom of that gullet. Real nice. Basically just puts out a little bit of lube, and if this thing works right, my chips are going to be fairly dry, and you can just clean this thing off with a vacuum. Alright, let's see how we did. It's actually really nice quality and completely cool to the touch. Wow. You're probably thinking, what the heck? Why is this thing put together? You didn't show any of it. Well, I had the camera off because the manual says you need a friend and a six-pack if you're going to put this thing together, and they weren't kidding. Not only is it heavy, and I put it together wrong. Well, I didn't really put it together wrong. It was more of misunderstanding the frame. So the ram should be flipped in the inverse direction so you have access to your manual hydraulic pump. The problem is, if I face it that way, my air piston collides with the mainframe. And I didn't think about that. I'm about 1 3/4 inches off from clearance. And I did not want to cut everything apart and weld another block on at the moment. I really think I'm only going to use air over on this thing. If it's a problem in the future, I'll cut it all apart again and fix it. But for now, we're going to leave it like that. So I've got it mounted upside down. I think it's going to work. You guys didn't think I'd actually let this thing be mounted on backwards fly, did you? Well, we're gonna pull it off, cut it all apart, and put it all back together again. Woo! Beautiful. So I've got the whole thing back together and hopefully assembled correctly. I got my clearance back on the air over pump, so we should give this thing a try, right? I've got 1 inch outside diameter tube in here and see how she does. Would you look at that? Not too bad at all. So one thing that I wanted to do is make some sort of holder for all of my frame and drive pins, so I can mount them all up on the side of the frame there. Now, I usually stay away from sheet metal work and just 3D print something, but figured I need to get better at this cookie cutter stuff, and since I have a shear that I'm working on cleaning up, why not put it to use? So this shear came out of a high school that's not using it anymore. I'm sure it has had a lovely life of no abuse, and I have not gone through it to ensure everything is straight yet, but I've got a mark 3 inches off my cut lined up with 3 inches on that ruler, and it looks like we're fairly straight, so oh man, really? It said this was capable of 16 gauge. Alright guys, don't beat me up if I'm using this thing wrong. I don't think I am. Alright, well my plan is to origami this up into a bracket, and I rarely use this, so it's probably actually my first time using this really at all. So we're gonna line up our marks here. Try to. Figuring out the correct orientation, or I guess the correct order of operations in bending to successfully bend everything the way I want it. So we're going to see if I can get that right this time. And we are just going to eyeball this. I wonder... There we go. Ha ha ha! Turkey. Perfect. Okay, so now we are starting to get there. I wish I tightened those a little bit in. Ooh, see, this is, okay, what was I planning on doing? Now, I'm fairly certain that I shouldn't have a gap there, but we're just going to take this easy and see if I get any pushback from this thing. These fingers are expensive, and I do not want to buy more. Actually, I'd love to have the ability to to make some. Alright, a little more. Okay, let's see if we can make this guy work. Okay, so there was a trick to how you get around this bend. There was a trick to it, and the trick was probably that my order of operations are wrong. I thought... Can I just bend this by hand? You know, I should probably learn how to do this. See? Yeah, I screwed up. I should not have done that by hand. Alright, well, we'll learn for the next time. Here's the final part. Didn't turn out perfect by any means, but this job's just to hold these guys on here and keep them where I can find them, and it is going to do absolutely that. With the arbor mount holder secured on, I really like how this turned out, just to keep all of these close, and these are some extra screws that came with it. Not sure if I'll need them or not, but I wanted to keep everything together. The only other thing that I wanted to add on was a WD-40 holder. And I'm really not happy with how this thing turned out. Looks like trash. Luckily, 3D printing's really easy. Now, not happy that this is plastic, but it did remind me that I'm sure the junkyard has some bikes with a bottle holder that might look really cool, and I can just swap this thing out. Should be the same mounting pattern. And that is where I'm going to end the first part of this video. Now, on the next installment, I am going to be totally reconstructing this tube roller. So, in the beginning, I did not know where I wanted to go with this thing, but we took it apart, and I joined a gate fabrication Facebook community page, and those guys had some awesome advice for me. The first being having fixed distance between my lower dies and the place it's at right now. That is not going to be enough. I need variable distance. I really need to add wings to this thing, expand my total width out to about 30 inches, and add a few variable placement slots for these lower roller dies. When I do that, I am going to lose my ability to drive the rollers together off the lower with the variable. It's just going to be too annoying. So, we need to convert the top roller to be the driven roller. I need to be able to put a bottle jack on here to put pressure on it. And I don't want to drive it with a hand wheel. It's going to annoy me. I'm a very lazy person. So I got a 1:60 gear reducer 3-phase motor. Need to figure out how to mount that up. If you want to see where this goes, stick around, and eventually there will be a part 2.